Hi, and welcome to the Generation Gap podcast. My name is Mary French. I am a graduate from college with a university degree in Bachelor of Arts with studies in theology and literature, a journalist, freelance journalist for 7 years, and I'm here with.
And my name is Bill French, and I'm Mary's grandfather. I'm a little older, I'm 79 years old, and I think I have a lot of life experiences. And spent 40 years as a kind of a career executive in business and 15 years as a college professor teaching business. And I even dabbled into kind of politics and served as the mayor of a small municipality for 4 years. So I think I have a pretty good broad perspective on what's happening in the world, and we hope to share it.
Yeah, we're just sharing our opinions. Today, we're going to be focusing on freedom of speech, why it's important, and how we hope to keep it protected and to keep enabling freedom of speech and expression throughout our generation. We're going to dive into different aspects of that.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting. Freedom of speech, never even thought of it being a problem, probably until the last 10 years. And it's interesting, there's been lots of studies and court cases and that. And so I picked up some things, and I think we're going to kind of discuss it from these perspectives. And basically, the Supreme Court of Canada, for example, stated the very lifeblood of democracies is the free exchange of ideas and opinions. Government overreach, censorship, and suppression are dangerous to democracy and to human rights. Freedom of expression, peaceful protest rights, and academic freedom are critically necessary in our public educations, on our streets, in our legislatures, and elsewhere for pursuing truth and knowledge. So I think that's been inhibited from my perspective greatly. And I don't want to go into a messy situation, but I really even think of the whole COVID issue, like the suppression of different points of view. I mean, they were purposely kind of suppressed by government. A lot of media just kind of clicked heels and followed government wishes in that. And, the alternative view, especially on vaccines and that, basically were drowned out. And so to me, there wasn't much freedom of speech there. And I think of other things right now. At one time, if you weren't causing any harm to somebody, you could say things and say, well, for example, I'll give you an example. Okay, I don't support same-sex marriage, but I have no problem with people doing that, whatever. That's just my position. But if you say that now, basically, somehow they've twisted it to some sort of hate speech. So that really, really worries me because as government basically becoming lawfare and just really trying to control every word we say. So that's my worry as a 79-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that ties into what we were speaking about briefly last week, which was in regards to. Sorry, that car went by. And completely took my train of thought with it. Whee!
Is it back now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when we were talking last week about what is hate, what is what is just and what is unjust, that's up to everyone's personal interpretation, right? So now we're looking at what does it mean to harm people? What does it mean to hate people? What does it mean to do ill to people? And part of what that has become, from what I'm seeing, is how you speak, right? Which, of course, how you speak is very important. And I definitely agree with that. But to what extent, then the dangerous area where that plays in is when you are voicing your opinion, when you're voicing it with grace as well. Like, because there's a difference between voicing your opinion with grace and there's a difference between voicing your opinion in a way where you're speaking over others and you're not allowing any type of discourse, and that is an important distinction. But annihilating the idea of having your own opinion at all when it contradicts what certain societal rules and expectations are, that's where I think things are getting a little tricky, and where we've broached on not enabling a full freedom of speech. And again, I'm very careful with that because there is a distinction, right? Having your own opinion with grace and an open mind, which is the ideal. And I think even when I was in university and studying the liberal arts, and by that I mean philosophy, theology, literature, ancient literature, and interpretation of that, is the ideal in a college situation is for you to expand your mind and have your mind open, and to be able to hear many points of view and think about them, debate them, but not necessarily that debate meaning you have to be right. A really, really good debate, a good conversation is probably going to change your position slightly, if at all, but for the stronger, right? And that all being said, I think that's the danger of not having full freedom of speech is, well, how is anyone supposed to develop their own understanding of things? Instead, you're just having to submit your opinion to what is society saying that is the proper way to think.
No, and also picking up on some of these things I picked up here, even the Supreme Court, like, really emphasized, freedom of speech is pursuing truth and knowledge, raising questions and challenges, opening minds, as you touched on, developing critical thinking, about both content and sources, and making space for dissenting views. And of course, engaging in democratic policy debates and supporting emerging leaders. And that way we get to decide what we want as a country. It's just like, I guess because of my age, I've just seen the erosion of it, and it really does concern me. Like, there's lots of things that, people say that are terrible. Don't get me wrong. But the one thing, and I wrote an article on this about 10 years ago, and of course my concern was when you went away from causing harm to people, like really aggressive, harassment or physical thing and that, and there was a slow movement to, okay, now if you hurt somebody's feelings, now how do you ever define that? Because like, depending on the sensitivity of the person, I mean, you could say one word that's not really even aggressive. It could hurt their feelings. And so I think they broaden the view on kind of what you can say. Like, and I remember writing in the article, we seem to have thought police now. Like, it's not that you're not even allowed to say things, it's that you can't even think it, and that's
1984.
yeah, it is. And so, that to me is really, really worrisome. And of course, I always say to everybody, especially when I was teaching, I used to always say, my generation, my dad's generation, because of wealth and growing economies and that, I think we screwed up the world. You guys have to fix it. And it is a mess. But you're only going to do that through healthy debate, discussion, communication, and every communication doesn't have to be a debate. Like, as a matter of fact, sometimes I have a terrible habit of like interjecting. And so the reality is, and I always like this expression, remember, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so we should listen twice as much as we're talking all the time. But it does scare me that, you're going to wake up in the morning, and we do. Like, I notice even myself, and I'm pretty freewheeling, and like, I really, really think about everything I do and say and how I say it and that. And to me, that's not healthy for society or my own personal mental well-being.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between diligence and, again, like I said, um, kindness and grace
Yeah,
in how we're speaking to others. And when it comes to things like hate speech, I think there's a difference between intention, like
yeah,
intentionally saying something or doing something in a harmful manner and attitude towards someone versus not. I think that's a big
yeah,
distinction. So, keeping your mind diligent is a good thing,
yeah,
but there is a difference again between walking on eggshells
yes,
because to fully voice your opinion on something in an appropriate space and manner is a no, I don't want to say dangerous, but it could be seen as harmful or hateful, right? Having to voice your opinion should never. Although here's a good thought experiment. Um, so let's say there's someone who believes. We'll take an extreme example, like let's say someone who has. I don't want to say a specific word for the sake of the podcast, but let's say someone who believes that a certain race of people shouldn't exist. And that is their opinion. That is, do they have free speech to bring that up in a conversation? Should it be allowed that you can openly have conversations about eradicating a certain type of people?
yeah.
Let's talk
See,
about that.
now, see, to me, that is hate speech. That one to me is a black and white line.
Mm-hmm.
When you want to obliterate a particular race,
Mm-hmm.
or you want to obliterate a person, you know, that to me is hate speech and it's totally unacceptable. No issue with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the example I use, okay, I don't think same-sex marriage is appropriate, and it's probably from my religious background and all that. That's fine,
Mm-hmm.
but I should be allowed to say it. The people, you know, I love them. I have no problem with them. I'm not going to deprive them of anything, but I should be able to say that. Now, I shouldn't be able to say, that guy makes me so mad, I'm going to kill him. You shouldn't be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was defined. It was kind of interesting. Another little kind of comment in here. Strongly worded expression should not be criminalized. Protest should not be banned. However, expressive freedoms are not absolute.
Mm-hmm.
Carefully crafted minimal limits may be imposed. For example, to protect individual reputations from defamation, and that's always been around.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly protecting against vandalism,
Mm-hmm.
and we've seen a lot of that,
Mm-hmm.
and to protect the physical safety of individuals and communities. So that's why I do believe suggesting someone should die or a race should be obliterated,
Mm-hmm.
that to me, I have no problem. I like that definition because you shouldn't be able to kind of do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so any threat of physical harm,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't do this, I'm going to beat you up,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think you can do that because to me, that's the violent aspect. And it really is troublesome how much that's crept into our society. And to me, I don't understand how it's accepted by any political movement, but it seems to be. So that's where it's really worrisome. And I think that's where lawfare gets really involved. And then all of a sudden they start making laws against this, that, or whatever. And then there's no freedom
Mm-hmm.
and defeats, what the purpose was.
Yep. Yeah. Now, this is the tricky part here, and I think this is where we're running into problems with free speech. Is I think, like I said last episode, I would assume that most people would agree that all of those criteria are good for what is considered free speech and what is considered not free speech
Yeah.
because it's hate speech, right? Now, the problem is, again, in definitions and in how we understand things to be. And I think the problem that's going on right now is what is considered violence and what is considered hate is, I think people are actually figuring that out. I think
Yeah.
that, and because of mental health crises, um, there's a lot that people can hear and take internally and can propel some negative mental health cycles that they're going through, right? So I know, I mean, one of the arguments I keep hearing is speech against a certain way of life or speech against a certain type of people negatively impacts their mental health, which is an equivalent to violence. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, see that's where that's where I think there's a bit of a problem, because I think as soon as you start wandering in how does someone feel,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just because a few words, not even necessarily directed to them,
Mm-hmm.
maybe directed at a group
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm saying. And but I think the reason we're having cloudy definitions of different things is, for some reason, a lot of media now control, you know, what's heard and whatever. Like I grew up in media. I spent the first 15 years in the broadcasting industry.
Mm-hmm.
Purposely, we even had a code of ethics, CAB, I think it was called back then,
Mm-hmm.
because I started in TV in 1966, just to give you some dating.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the news director, everything. You had to present both sides of the argument,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And of course, you know, when it came to election time, it was interesting. You know, even though your newsroom and everybody presented, there was a, you know, the organization might in fact endorse someone, but still their news department was separate from that. They could still go out and do stories, you know, maybe on the opposition of what the organization was supporting,
Mm.
saying this is a great guy, this is why he might be good. You're allowed to do that. Not now.
Mm.
Like, you know, if you look at broadcasters, and in Canada, let's talk about Canada, like CBC, for example. I mean, you know, there's been stories come out in the last number of years. Simply good people have been squeezed out because they won't support an extremely liberal or left view, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think we got into really, really dangerous territory. And another kind of comment on here I really like,
Mm-hmm.
governments should have to prove the necessities of limits in any situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, freedom of expression means protection from government or legal overreach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the courts are being used as weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everybody thinks of the U.S., and I have no opinion on that. I do, but I'm not for this venue. But the reality is we're getting kind of, you know, taken in that direction. And freedom of speech is, as I said, if you're not doing any direct harm, like a really, like aggressive harm, physical, fear of death, you know, harassment and that, I'm sorry, my opinion is you should be able to express that. Yes, you shouldn't be able to use obscene language, which has crept into a lot of media in the last number of years.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't be able to, you know, pornography, all that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because again, where did, like, you know, and at some time we'll talk about, like, all those laws came from basically a moral direction of this country when it was founded, you know, 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was formed, whether you like it or not, it was formed on a basically Christian Judeo principle. Like, you look at every law, you know, you can check off a commandment. So, you know, when you shift away from that, saying, okay, well, that doesn't count, that's religion, you know, we're a secular society. Well, to me, a total secular society is a really scary proposition, because, like, a truly secular society to me is anarchy. Like, everybody's opinion, you know, is going to dictate what the policies are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an impossibility in my view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the objective morality is based
Right.
on what is being put forth from the state and the media and collective societal values, right?
Right.
That's what morality is now, and do you live up to that, right?
Yeah.
Now, the unfortunate thing about that is that can change and shift
Yeah.
So if you're on board with that morality right now, that's great. But give it 50 years, what has what is good has now changed, right? So maybe now you're the one outside of that definition of morality, and then you're the one who's being called hate speech because your opinion doesn't
Yeah.
match with the new societal morality, right?
Right.
So that's an issue. And just dialing back a little bit as well, just to the point I was starting to lead up to in regards to what is interpreted as harmful to someone who's maybe struggling with certain aspects of mental health and really need encouragement more than discouragement is, again, freedom of speech in the right places, right? If you're having a conversation where you're expressing your opinion, you'd hope that's in a consensual uh, conversation, right? Where the other person equally wants to have a conversation,
Right.
right? If you're just talking to somebody who's not wanting to be participating in this conversation and debate at all, well, that's not ideal, right? That's not
Right.
great. So I think that's an important distinction as well. Is am I actually having an debate here with someone who, granted, might have a very different opinion from me, but we're agreeing that we want to have this conversation, maybe to open each other's minds,
Yeah.
to polish our own thoughts, right? And that's where I think it's important, especially for yeah, I think it's important for that distinction to be made
Yeah,
and
yeah.
expressed. Yeah.
Yeah, I know one of the subjects we're going to talk about down the road is education. So, it's kind of interesting. Like most of the opinions now that people are express
Mm-hmm.
are actually someone else's opinions,
Mm-hmm.
like perspectives. Like, and I'm curious, how many people have their own opinion? And I hate to say it, I don't think a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's almost a parroting of it, and because they've been inundated, and especially like I get a kick out of maybe I shouldn't mention this. I love, obviously I watch CTV News and I watch CBC News, but I also purposely go through the news channel, like um, like basically I like Fox News because they have very articulate people, but they don't seem to take life quite as harshly as the CNN. Like when I look at a lot of the CNN reporting in that, and both of them are biased, there's no question about it. And but the reality is, like I would say most of the CNN people I see, they are under a mental health, crisis, where for some reason, on the other side, there seems to be an opinion. Well, okay, this is the story. This is what it is, but it's not killing me. This is my opinion. This is, what I think. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine by me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, freedom of speech. That's what we're talking
Yeah.
about. Is if it's out there, right? Your opinion's out there.
Yeah.
If someone wants to listen, it's there,
Yeah.
right? If someone wants to open their mind to that, it's there,
Yeah.
right? People can't ignore it.
Right.
I don't think that's the best idea, because I think the best way to grow yourself is to listen to an opinion, even if it's entirely different than yours, right? Even if you still end up entirely disagreeing, but at least it's there,
Yeah.
right? If it's not there, how is anyone supposed to A, expand their mind, and B, polish their own ideas against something else that's completely different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, and I think that is the issue, because we don't have a lot of discussion anymore. Like, thank goodness in Canada we're not quite as, politicized or polarized. But there is
We're
a lot
pretty
of
polarized.
it. Yeah, right?
We're pretty
Oh
polarized.
no, we are polarized, but like not totally to the extent, because we have coffee here in our condo, and I'll bring up
Ah.
subject matters. And,
Coffee can bridge any
yeah,
differences.
no, but it's interesting. Like it's like there's a lot of opinions people don't share with me, which fine. I listen to their opinion, and then for the most part, they'll listen to what I have to say, probably ignoring it more than listening. But the reality is, it's not. I'm not coming back for a coffee next week because you're crazy. Like where you are seeing a fair amount of that with our southern neighbors, and yeah, and then you can find the cause of that one pretty easy. So, and you need that discussion. You can't, like, when I talk to people, I want to know different things. Unlike you, I never had, I had a high school education, didn't have a university. So everything I learned from, basically institutions or whatever. Sure, I took some, further education, specific subject matter and that. But my opinions and my approach basically is from tons of sources and not just from educational institutions. And maybe that's why I have a different view or a broader view. I have no idea. But even during my education, like everything was presented to me. Here it is, take what you want of it, and instead of kind of saying, well, if you don't believe this, you're crazy. Because I know my teachers and that of the day they were liberals and conservatives and NDP, and they all got along and they had their opinions, and you'd see them out supporting their parties, but that was it. They didn't seem to bring that in and ram it down. They try and, if you want to have a conversation, of course, again, conversation. Yeah. If you want a conversation, they'd be quite happy to do it and share their information or their perspective. But if you didn't totally accept it, you didn't say, oh, you're out of your mind. And they didn't tell you you were crazy. And they didn't take marks off the next exam because they're a little upset at you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the freedom of speech is, I think it's a bigger deal than we care to.
And I think the issue, one of the big issues as well, is we are living in an era of echo chambers. Like even the way the algorithm is set up.
Yeah.
If you are focused on a certain perspective, that's what you're going to see in your reels. That's what you're going to see rise to the top of the comments. I remember someone had told me that they saw a post and they read the comments and they saw all negative, like opposing views to whatever they saw, right? That's all they saw,
right.
Comment after comment after comment. Their friend saw the same post and all the comments they saw were positive and supportive, one after another, which is concerning. Because I always used to go to the comment section of a video so that I could see what is the most dramatic comment that is supporting this, and what is the most dramatic one that is not supporting it.
Yeah.
And now I have had to, thank goodness I was doing that, because I trained the algorithm to let both slip through. Right. And so I have to be very attentive now when I'm going through comments to stay and rest on each one for an extended amount of time so that I can keep that happening. Unfortunately, I have lost part of it in some levels, but it's scary because once you do leave it, once you are in an algorithm that's just giving you one voice, it is very, very, very hard to find both sides. And that is a concern because, again, the beauty of conversation and free speech and debate is that you can expand your mind and you can see new perspectives and you can fully understand your own and form your own perspective. Ideally, everyone has their own perspective. It isn't this side versus this side, right?
Yeah.
It isn't that one versus this one. Pepper versus salt.
Yeah.
Only have salt.
Yeah.
No, you can only have pepper.
Yeah.
Like that's not realistic, right? So that's a big concern I see.
Like obviously, the kind of the media companies, like they're really controlling it. Like as I said, the broadcast media shifted to a slant of maybe left or right. But the problem with kind of social media and that, because of their systems and that, they can really skew. Well, we saw it, again, we saw it in COVID. It was very skewed information. And I guess if you were under a certain umbrella, you probably saw more things of different opinions, where most of us would just got one opinion. And kind of picking up again on some of the Supreme Court cases on freedom of speech, just some of the wording, and these were big cases that were challenged at the Supreme Court. And some of the opinions were the protection of freedom of expression is premised upon fundamental principles and values that promote the search for and attainment of truth, participation in social and political decision making, and the opportunity for individual self-fulfillment through expression. And of course, continuing, free expression is valued above all as being instrumental to democratic governance. The two other rationales for protecting freedom of expression: encouraging the search for truth through the open exchange of ideas and fostering individual self-actualization. And I like that because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I mean, the epitome is self-actualization. And obviously, and it does. There's no question, it improves human dignity. So, yeah, like, I mean, everything we have, all the laws say we have, it's so important, but I'm still not totally understanding how is it being so suppressed, you know? And it is. And I don't know if there's a light at the end of the tunnel. If there isn't, I don't think society can improve itself. Because we do have to have our own opinions based on critical thinking, gathering knowledge, and that's what moves society forward. Like, you know, when we touch on cancel culture, for example, like the past, we learn from the past, all the terrible things that were done. And I'll be the first to admit, awful things. But we wouldn't be where we are today if they didn't happen and people didn't sit down and say, okay, somehow this isn't right, you know? And that's how it improved. Like, you know, when people want to destroy their own country and start again, even though none of them have any idea what they want to do again, they just want to destroy it because it's bad, you know? And, you know, that's why we need, like, to me, that's why we really do need that freedom of speech, discussion. Debate's good because debate, you know, I mean, makes your mind really click. But you need the discussion and, you know, not get so upset that you walk away. And you are seeing more and more of that. I'm hoping it's maybe slowly coming back, but I don't know. And if it doesn't, I think society is in a tough spot.
Yep. Do you think there's a race for objective truth?
You know something, I think the problem is, you know, the old big picture question, what is truth?
Exactly. This is my closing thought.
Okay.
Is along the lines of culture makes morality right now. That's what's going on, right? So if that's the case, right, if there's maybe a subjective objective truth, which is what the culture is deciding is truth, right? Whoever wins, and I'm saying this like with quotations, right? Wins the culture, decides what is morality. Right? Which is why I think it's connected with the polarization, right? Well, if we can only have one objective morality, one objective truth, we all got to kind of get on the side of what's right, right? Versus everyone having their own opinion and coming together from that, right? So that's just my closing pondering thought is there a race for the culture, ergo the morality, the truth? And in that case, something else to consider is truth something that we decide, or is it something that is objective in and of itself? Is there an objective truth? I think that the answer to that question
Yeah.
holds the key to a lot.
Yeah, and I think we'll have a really good discussion on that because to me, my thought process is very simplistic. To me, the only objective truth comes from God. Subjective truth comes from the culture and society, and it's a moving target, depending what the strongest voice is. That's that, and if the and now the stronger voice is carrying it, even though it may not represent a majority of society. And why? Because speech is being suppressed. So you're not having the discussion, you're not having a debate, you're not collecting the information. And I think we all have to look at ourselves. Are we really, really trying to kind of find out for ourselves when we hear something? You know, like I'm a skeptic. Like everything I hear, I don't believe, first of all. And then, okay, well, that's true. I find out, follow it through, and that was true. But like
these days, someone could say the sky is made of tiles.
Yeah.
Right? And the sky's gonna be dropping tiles. And
Yeah.
I'd be like, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not. Like,
Yeah.
that's literally.
No,
Oh,
and
man.
that's back to my point, where so our opinions and our expression is someone else's, because someone said, "Oh, the sky's falling." Oh yeah, I guess it is. You're not even going to
Yeah.
spend 5 minutes to figure it. Say, wait a second, that's the craziest idea I've ever heard. So, so anybody that's watching, have a good conversation with if you have children, grandchildren, your neighbor, and don't get mad if the opinion is different than yours. It might ruffle your feathers, because mine gets ruffled quite frequently. But the reality is, if we don't go down that road of getting back to good old conversation, instead of glued to our social media and news channels and all that, we'll never move this society in the direction that, in my opinion, God intended to go.
And I'd like to add to that, I would like to challenge any listeners to find someone who ruffles your feathers, because when you ruffle your feathers, you're going to find out what's underneath, right? So if you're ready for that, find someone who has a very different opinion from yours, and see what happens. See what happens from conversation. And that leads into just kind of our little lead out here, which is you don't have to agree with anything that we're saying. In fact, it's feel free to disagree by
Yeah.
all means. Like, that's what we're here for. We're just stating our thoughts and our opinions and putting that out. And yeah, we feel free to listen along and share your thoughts, and we
Yeah.
won't take it as hateful.
Yeah,
It's
no.
not hateful.
Yeah. No, and I think that is important. Like the whole idea of this was because obviously my 27-year-old granddaughter here, and then we've had lots of conversations over our life. I was fortunate enough in her early years. 2 of my daughters and 2 of my grandchildren lived with us for 5 years. So we got to grow up together, as a matter of fact. And I've always listened to my children, and some of them are somewhat critical of me, and deservedly so, most likely. But the point is, yes, we're not here to argue with you, or quite honestly, if you want to debate, we could do that, but I don't even want to do that. I want to just present a point of view and encouraging you. Tell people what your point of view is. Don't just be a parrot of someone else saying, well, so-and-so says, so I think that's right. Well, you can share with that, but add your personal knowledge and thought process to it, and, round it out a little more. Let's just not be parrots. Let's think for ourselves. God bless you all.
Thanks for listening in, everyone.